Welcome, welcome everyone. Welcome to Kitchen Table Creativity. I'm Donna Leffler, and today I have a really super fun project. This is a basket full of summer vegetables and herbs with a few flowers thrown in on the sides, and of course the whimsical hearts. And I'm so excited to paint this today because it's the sixth painting in my summer series and the final painting. And I actually grew a vegetable garden in some raised beds that I had put in, and it's just incredible. And so I'm so excited about my garden, about the fact that it's still summer. I'm harvesting these vegetables and just excited to sit down with you again and paint this final painting in the series. So to start with, I am going to run through my supply list really quick. If you've watched some of my other videos, I pretty much use the same supplies every week. I do have a new brush that I'm going to be using today that I'm going to show. Other than that, the palette is the same, the paints are the same, everything is pretty much the same. So to start out with, I always like to have some paper towel in hand, and that's just to blot the water off my brush and extra paint that might be on there. A scrap of watercolor paper. I'm using the other side of this one, which I used before. That way you can test your colors before you put them on your work, on your painting, and make sure they're the right consistency, the right color that you want. I have 3 pens, and 2 of them I've been using week after week. And they are the Micron Pigma Micron Fine Tip Archival Black Permanent Ink pens. I use the 05 and the 005, and those are for the fine detail work when we finish the painting. Then I have actually a new white pen. The Sharpie pens seem to be discontinued, the water-based ones. This was the one that I have used so often and shown, but I cannot find it online anymore. So I have switched now to this one, and I think I actually like this better. It's POSCA. It's made in Japan, and it is water-based, Mitsubishi Pencil Company. And I'm really liking this so far, so I'm just going to use this for a little tiny bit of detail work, and so I will show that. I have my water bottle with plain water, which I like to spray my paints ahead of time and make sure that they have water in them so that they're ready to go. The paint palette that I'm using is the same one that I've used in the last 5 videos before this one. This is the 6th. These are all Daniel Smith paints. You don't have to buy these exact colors unless you want to. I always put the names in the description, and you can find them on Amazon. You can find them in art stores. Not everywhere sells Daniel Smith. They are professional quality paints, but again, use whatever you have on hand. I don't want you to have to run out and buy a bunch of new supplies unless you want to, of course. So I have this beautiful yellow. I have this red. It's more of like a coral red. I have its turquoise blue, a nice sap green, and this beautiful violet color. And I've used this, like I said, over and over, and I'm going to finish using with it today. And then we'll be getting into September, and so I'm going to start a new color palette, which will be more fall-oriented. Okay, so then I have traced my image onto an 8x8 piece of watercolor paper. I've been doing this series of 6 paintings on 8x8 size. I cut my paper using a trimmer into 8 inches by 8 inches because I have frames that I got from Amazon. I'm framing these, and I will make a video at the end of all 6 together so you can see what a real collection looks like. And they all have a lot of similarities, which I'll talk about again at another time. You can put this in a journal book if you have like a watercolor journal that you've been painting in. You can put it on a card. You can do it really pretty much anywhere. It does not have to be on the same size that I'm working on. So this is the painting. If you look in the description, you can print out the PDF, which is a line drawing like this, and you can very easily trace it, which is what I do. Nothing wrong with tracing at all. I mean, we want to get to painting, so to sit and draw this with freehand, I could do it, but it would take me quite a while, and I'd probably have to do quite a bit of erasing. It's really nice to be able to trace and just have it already centered on your paper and ready to go to paint. Now on this one, I don't always, when I'm tracing these, I use a stylus and I just go over all the different areas. And usually I just kind of hold it down, but there's so much detail in this today that I decided to put a couple pieces of tape. Now, if you use tape, make sure you get artist tape because it won't stick and rip your paper when you go to remove it. It comes off very cleanly. So under here, I have a piece of graphite paper, which is dark side down. When I go ahead and trace it with using the stylus, or you could use a pen or a pencil, then I have a nice organized, balanced, centered image on my paper, and it's all ready to go to paint. Now the graphic paper, I've used this for all 6 of mine. You can see I use it over and over, and it's still going strong. I could probably get at least a couple more, so you don't feel like you have to throw your graphite paper out. once you've used it once. You can reuse it over and over. Now, the brushes. I'm going to use this small brush. This is a new brush I just got. It's called a Princeton Velvet Touch. I think it was about $10 on Amazon. I can't quite remember. It's a number 2 round brush. I used it the other day and I really like it because the tip has a very nice fine point. And it's dry right now, but when it's wet, it stays into a very nice fine tip point, and so I can get into the detail work very easily with this brush. I'm also going to keep this one on hand. This is a 3/0, which is a tiny, tiny brush, just in case I need it. I might use it, I might not use it. I have a ceramic palette here, which I will use to mix my paints, and then I have always 3 jars of water, clean water. The first one I use to, especially if I'm switching colors, to rinse my very dirty brush. The second one to rinse it again. And by the time you get to the third brush, or the third jar of water, your brush actually is quite clean, and this water, the third one, really stays super clean, and you can use it for mixing paints, or you know, if your first jar gets so dirty, you have extra water on hand. So I always like to have 3 on hand. All right, so I think that that's pretty much it for my supplies. I'm going to start by spraying these paints, and I'm kind of putting them over here off to the side so I don't get water on my paper. But I'm going to start with the yellow. I always like to start with the lightest color, and there's really several reasons why. First, it's because if you started with something very dark like the purple, your water is going to end up looking purpley right away and very dirty. And so I find it's just better to stay with the lighter colors. And it's also kind of a system, I guess, that I've created. And so it's just easier for me to think lighter to darker, because you can always add more paint, but you can't really remove paint very easily. So it's best to start with a little bit lighter. Now you can test. I'm going to start with a pretty dark yellow. And every week I've been painting the sun the same kind of way, because each of these 6 paintings I've been doing, they all have the same or very similar sun. And it's just fun, it's whimsical, and so I like to start by painting the sun just a nice solid yellow. And then once I start mixing, I'm going to go back and add a little bit of more orangey color to warm it up a little bit, because it looks pretty plain and flat when it's just a solid yellow. Then the other thing that I have here that's yellow is this summer squash. I would say out of all the vegetables, I think I like summer squash the best. It's pretty plain, actually, but it just has a nice fresh flavor, I think. And growing up, I have fond memories of my grandma growing it and cooking it. And, you know, maybe it's more of a emotional, fond memory type thing for me. All right, and then I've got 2 little flowers here that I'm going to paint yellow, the small little flowers on either side of the basket. And this brush is just phenomenal to get into little tiny areas like this with the very tip of it. And I think the Princeton Velvet Touch, they're pretty easy to find. And I was talking about this at my workshop the other night with the ladies who attended, which I do a free workshop every month, and you're welcome to join us. It's always fun. And I used this brush for the first time, and I was telling them, if you're going to invest in anything, I probably would invest in good brushes to start out with. You know, I know like a lot of people are on a budget. They don't want to spend a ton of money on a new hobby, especially if they don't know if they're going to like it. But I think it's well worth spending the money on the brushes, because they will last you a long, long time. They don't get used up, really. And it's just so much easier to paint when you have some nice brushes where you're not losing bristles and that sort of thing. Okay, I'm going to add just a little tiny bit of another leaf here, because I actually don't want a space, which I am painting these leaves yellow to start out with, and I'm going to add green in after. These are lettuce leaves. So, you know, maybe I missed it when I was tracing, or maybe it wasn't even there, I don't know, but I decided I wanted another leaf. So just to say, you can add things as you're going and don't feel like you're locked into any one particular look or style. Now, some of these other tops of these vegetables, I'm going to also add green, but I want to add a little bit of yellow. These are the tops of the carrots. And all of these vegetables are vegetables that I had planted in my garden. And this is the first time I've grown a vegetable garden in a long, long time. I really don't have what they say a green thumb. They call a green thumb. I've struggled before growing vegetables. And this year I thought, I'm getting these raised planter beds and I'm going to just try it again. And I've been so happy that I did, because I had a lot better success with this garden than I have in the past. And partly it's because I live in Idaho now, and things grow really well here. And I think a big part of it too is just having the raised beds, because I don't have to bend over. I don't have to kneel on the ground. So they were a really great investment. Now I'm painting most of these leaves yellow right now, and I mean, I'm going to be adding green, but I wanted to add kind of a base layer so a little bit of yellow peeks through. Let's start with that. All right, let me see if there's anything else. I think I'm going to do this zucchini stem and maybe just a little bit of yellow on that. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is rinse my brush really well. Whenever you're switching to a new color, it's good to rinse your brush really well. The first jar, the second jar, and the third jar. And if you put your brush all the way in the water, you probably have water in the barrel. It's good to dry it. And I'm going to take some of this coral color, and I'm going to add just a very small amount of this to the yellow. And I want to create an orange. And so I'm probably, well, let's see how this looks. I'm going to say I'm probably going to add more yellow, but maybe not. And I only need a tiny bit right now for this. So that's pretty orangey. I think what I'm going to do is use this, but I'm going to water it down. And see how just by watering it down, it's getting lighter, adding more water. This is where having clean water comes in handy. So I am going to use a little bit darker for the center of these flowers. And I have quite a bit of water on my brush, so I'm going to dab it just a tad. And if your flowers are wet still from the yellow paint, it's probably good to wait until they dry, because you don't really want the orange to seep into the yellow. But you know what, if that happens, it's not a big deal. Your flowers will just end up being a little bit more orangey instead of yellow. And I'm going to add some of this very watered down to the sun, just to give it a little bit more interest and not look so terribly flat. To do that, you can add a little bit of paint and a little bit of water and just kind of give it a circular motion. All right. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to, I think I was going to do the basket. I think I'm going to wait though, because I'm going to make the basket more of a brown color than orange. And so I'm going to wait on that for right now. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go back to this coral. And I have some of the pure coral color here. Again, I'm going to test it. That's a nice, not too dark. So I've added some water. And I'm going to start with the heart. And really the only other thing is the tomato. Now, I'm just going to stay with this smaller brush. If you feel like you are not getting enough coverage because your brush is too small, you can switch to a bigger brush for sure. But the reason why I like these round brushes is because the point area is very, very fine, and so you can get into little tiny crevices with it. But you can also pretty easily paint a little bit larger areas by just pressing down and tilting your brush a little bit more. So yes, once a month I have a free class online, and everyone is welcome to attend. And for each quarter, I'll be switching up the project. So right now we're working on a whimsical, cute bird. And I believe I have a link in the comment, or in the description, I mean, to sign up for that. It's totally free. You don't need a ton of supplies. Come online on Zoom with me and we paint for about 90 minutes. And I like to give, you know, anything that I learn that I'm using that's new, whether it's supplies or techniques I'm learning. And it's just super fun. It's a way to meet other artists, other budding artists. You don't have to have any experience. In fact, if you have no experience, it's probably better. But if you do have experience, you're more than welcome to come. All right, and then one other thing, I believe, yeah, I think I'm going to do this flower. I was debating whether I wanted to do both of these flowers in purple, but I think I'm going to do this one in red. And partly because when you're looking at color, it's kind of a good thing to spread your color throughout your work so that it's not all concentrated in one area. And that helps the eye, when someone is looking at your painting, it helps the eye travel across the work and see everything instead of focusing in on just one thing. So like right now, it's obvious that this tomato right in the center of the basket is just kind of popping out because it's red, because it's bright, and your eye will just go there along with the heart. And so now that I have the pink on the side here, it kind of starts to balance it out a bit. Okay, so that is all I need for that right now. And I think the next thing I'm going to do is the turquoise hearts. Okay, so I'm going to make the hearts this beautiful blue color, and I'm going to leave it pretty thick. Rinse your brush really well before you switch to a new color, as always. And I will test it. That's perfect. Now, if you don't want to make your hearts blue on here, you don't have to. You could do them whatever color you want. But I was really trying hard to create a collection that has the same colors in common. Now, not every collection has to have all the same colors. They could just be the theme, like maybe a collection of birds or flowers, different types of flowers. They could be all different colors. But I really was kind of stuck on this idea of I want to use these same 5 colors in every single one of these. And so I thought about making the basket this blue color, but it just didn't resonate with me. Like a wicker basket should look like wicker, not like it's dyed blue or something. And that's just me. Like I have things sometimes that I think about or that I do, and it does not have to be that way. In fact, I encourage people, try different things than what I'm doing. You know, you're welcome to copy my work, absolutely. If you do share it, all I ask is that you maybe give a link to my YouTube site where you got it, or just say my name, and that way it'll help me to grow my following. But I like it when people paint the images that I create, because I think it makes people happy, and that makes me happy. So I just wanted a touch of blue, and so that's all I'm going to do with the turquoise. And next I'm going to go to the green. Now there is a lot of green in this painting. So again, as always, rinsing my brush really well. I already wet my green down. This is a very, very dark green. Because these are professional paints, they are just very dark anyway. They have a lot of pigment in them. And I'm learning a lot about paint as I continue to paint. So I'm going to start with this lettuce, and I'm going to start with a kind of a light green wash, and I'm going to leave some of the yellow peeking out at the top. Just a little bit. So this is kind of like a layered wash I'm putting over the yellow. And this is the one thing that in my garden it didn't do really super well is the lettuce, because it was kind of already hot when I put it in, and lettuce is a cool weather crop. So I did get a few leaves. Now, kind of the same thing with this green pepper. I'm gonna paint the pepper, and I already added just a touch of yellow in certain areas, so I'm just gonna kind of work around those a little bit. I want them to just peek through ever so slightly. So it's more of like a yellowish green in some areas. So yeah, there's really nothing like fresh vegetables. Kind of forgot how good it is to get a fresh tomato straight out of the garden. So delicious. I really love vegetables anyway. I could eat just vegetables. I could pretty easily be a vegetarian, but I am finding as I'm getting older that I need a little bit more protein. That's what my doctor says. So I do eat meat. Don't love it, but I do eat it. I'm not against eating it. I just prefer vegetables. And I'm kind of doing the same thing, just maybe letting just a hint of this yellow show through. And don't worry if you go outside the lines. We're going to use the black marker, which the fine tip pen, to add some detail work. And it really makes everything pop. And it helps if you go outside the lines. You can use the black pen to kind of make up for that. So don't worry, just freely paint, have fun. And I am going to make the stems green. Usually I like to keep the stems fairly dark. Now when you're doing a straight line like this, it's good to just keep your hand on resting, and then just pull down with your fingers. And that way you'll get an easier line, a straighter line, or the line to go in the curve that you want it to go in. Okay, and then for this zucchini, what I'm going to do is add a little bit of this blue, see what I get. I want it to be a little bit more bluish green. Let's see what that looks like. Not a whole lot different, but I think I am going to use that for the zucchini, at least to start out with. This summer series is actually a little bit more detailed work than I normally do. And these projects take a little bit longer, but everything that I do pretty much can be done in an hour. And I like to keep it that way because you can finish your projects and move on to something else and not feel so bogged down like it's going to take forever to finish. Okay, I like that. Let's see, I have the tomato, the top to the tomato. And whenever I'm going over here, I'm just blotting my brush, either extracting water from it or paint or both. And that you kind of just get a feel for over time. Like it'll start to, you'll just know as soon as you put your brush on the paper that it's too much or too little. Or and what I'm doing now, I'm gonna go back into some of these areas and add some a little bit darker, like off to the side here. And this is supposed to look just like a tiny bit of shadow. Same thing with the lettuce. And I think also I am gonna rinse my brush. Whenever I dip into the pan like this, I like to rinse my brush just to make sure that it's not another color on there. And this is pretty dark. I do want this. I wanted this to be a little bit darker. The base of the leaves, the grass. Okay, and then I've got my carrots. Those are going to be orange. Eggplant. Actually, this is, I think, a pepper. The flowers, the purple basil, and the basket. Okay, I think we're good. And I think I'm going to paint the basket first, and then I'm going to go back and do the ground and see if I want that green or if I want to keep that more of a straw color. So next, we will move on to the orange. So I've added a little bit more yellow to my palette here, but I do have this orange color, which I think might work. I don't know if I'll really have enough paint here though. So I think what I'm going to do is add this coral to this yellow I just added here. And we'll see how that looks. I want it to be quite orangey. And I think that will work. So we have a pepper here. And I have this pepper plant that is supposed to grow these tiny lunchbox-sized peppers. And they're supposed to be all different colors. And so I think that this is actually a pepper, is what I was thinking when I created this. Because I don't have eggplant. I don't really love eggplant. I don't hate it, but it's not one of my favorite vegetables. So I didn't grow those this year. I have grown them before. But like I said, when I lived in California, I didn't have a whole lot of, surprisingly, I didn't have a whole lot of luck with gardening. And I think partly because we lived inland where it got very hot in the summer, but also I don't really think it was that as much as I didn't really enjoy kneeling on the ground to work on the garden. And it was hard to see underneath the plants. And this raised garden bed is just phenomenal. I love it so much. It's really great with the grandkids too, because they can reach everything. It's like 3 feet high. So I would highly recommend. And another thing I'm going to do here is because this, I think like this yellow squash looks so flat. I'm going to add just a very watered down bit of orange to it. Just kind of give it some depth. Okay, and then let's see, what else do I need? I think that is pretty good for the orange, but it's so warm today, it's already drying, and I am going to add a little bit more to these, just another layer, make them a little bit darker. Because I really want the colors to stand out. I don't want them to look pastel-y. All right. Okay, and then as I'm painting, I'm noticing a few little areas where I missed the greens. So I'm gonna go back into the green here. And I want to add it, oh, it's quite dark. I want it that dark. That one. And that one. There's a lot of detail in this picture. Again, you're going to want this to be dry, and I can see I'm already kind of bleeding a little bit into the orange, so I'm going to blot that off using my paper towel. And that's how you can fix something very quickly. If you notice it right away and it's still wet, you can pretty easily just blot it like that. So I'm going to let that dry for a minute. And while I have this, I'm in this mode of adding more color, I'm going to add another layer to the tomato. This time, this one has just a hint of orange in it. I really don't want the tomato to look pink. I wanted it to look more, oh, I guess a warmer color of red. Okay, then we have the purple left. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to paint the purple, the basil, this pepper, and this flower, and then we're going to finish with the basket and the ground. So for this purple, it is quite dark, and every time I do this, I talk about how dark it is. Every time I paint a new painting, so I have to water it way down to start out with. I always like to go less to begin with and test it, make sure it's not too overbearing. And that's pretty dark even when it's watered down, but that's okay. So I'm going to start with the basil. And it's always good when you're moving on to a new color, a new something that's kind of overlapping, as like this green zucchini is behind this basil. If the zucchini was not dry, I might have a problem with it bleeding in, and I don't like it so much when that happens. If it happens, you can try blotting it like I just showed you, but it's kind of better to just wait until it dries. Now, sometimes you just aren't aware that it's wet, and you know, that's kind of what just happened with my carrot. But watercolor, what I'm finding, I think this is partly why it's so relaxing, because you really have to just kind of be patient. Go slow. Just watch the paint and the water flow together, and not worry so much about it being perfect. And someone told me at my workshop that she is sleeping better since she started watercolor painting. That makes me really happy, because my cortisol's always run high, and you know, just always going full speed ahead, kind of stressed out. I think there's probably a lot of people that are struggling with it. If you haven't had yours tested, well, my doctors over the last few years have really focused a lot on cortisol and how it's, I mean, we need it. It's a good hormone. At the same time, too much of it is not good. Kind of like when you have sugar in your blood and your insulin levels are being increased because there's so much sugar. So it's good to try to lower it if it runs high. Okay, I like that a lot. I love this purple. This is such a pretty color. And we'll do the pepper. I don't know if my peppers will actually be this purple. They're interesting. They're turning like one pepper will have a little bit of purple, and then it will have green, it will have orange, and they're really sweet. They're so crunchy and so fresh. I don't think I've ever had peppers that were that fresh. They have a really nice crisp flavor. It's making, as I'm painting this, I'm thinking, ooh, that would be so great to go out and pick one of those right now. So I'm going to do a little bit of darker, and a lot of these, like if you had this in a basket, you would, as the different vegetables are against each other, they would probably create some kind of shadow a little bit. But I always say you don't have to worry so much when you paint these very simple, whimsical watercolors about realism, about making it look very realistic. But if you want to practice, you know, pretending like you had a light shining on it, where would the light be? Probably at the top, you know, and you can practice making it darker in certain areas. So it's actually pretty fun to do. And if you end up with some areas that you want blended, you could just add some pure water like this and soften any edges that might occur. All right, I think I'm gonna leave this guy the way he is. Not super uniform in color, at least for now. We'll see. A lot of times your paints look different when they dry too. And I talk about that a lot in these tutorials, that give it a chance, let it dry, then come back again, and maybe you want to add some more paint, maybe not. Maybe it developed like a bloom or a hard edge from the water, and maybe you want to smooth that out. So don't judge whatever it looks like when it's wet. All right, and then now that this has had a chance to dry just a tad, I think I am going to add a little bit more color to it. And again, when we go back and add the pen work, if you decide to do that, it definitely changes the look. Okay, so at this point, I see a couple little areas. I'm going to rinse my brush really well. And I want to add some dark coral, more concentrated, to like the flowers. This flower, I should say. Just kind of the center, and then I'm going to add a little bit more to this heart also. Okay, take a step back. I like the way this is looking. And the last thing then is we're going to mix kind of a straw brownish color for the basket. So to do that, I'm going to take what I have on my palette here already, and I'm going to start with this orange and add some water to it because it's been sitting a while. Probably move a little bit of this over here too. And I could probably use this, but I feel like it looks too similar to the carrots. And I wanted it to be a little more brown. So I'm going to take a little bit of green, put that in. Let's see how that looks now. This looks a little more brown. And I think I'm going to add a little more red. And that might be a good color. Yes, I like that a lot. So you can see I could add a little bit of purple too, but if you mix all of your paints together, you're going to get brown. And that's just the way it goes. That's why a lot of times people's paintings end up looking kind of muddy, because they do layers that maybe aren't dry. They combine colors that create too many colors together, and it might just turn brown. If you want brown, that's great, but a lot of times we don't want brown. And this is more of like a straw brown. It's not really a dark brown. See, I have a little bit too much water here, so I'm just kind of lifting it off, drying my brush and lifting it off. And I'm not going to worry too much about the markings on this basket. I'm gonna use my pen, my black pen, to create the effect of straw. And this is using a little bit more than I had planned, so I'm going to try to stretch it to cover the rest of this basket, which one of the lessons with this sort of thing is to mix enough of the color that you're going to use, because it's very hard to get the same exact color. But in this case, it's okay, because I'll just go over the entire basket with the new color. And maybe it'll be a little more orange or a little more brown, which is totally fine. So I like, when I'm painting, I like to tell you when things don't go exactly as planned, because I know it's probably going to happen to you at some point too. Happens to everyone. And that you don't have to worry. There's always a way to fix things. And absolute worst case scenario, maybe you want to just repaint it, which is okay too. Practice. Let's look at it as practice. Okay. And I kind of like the way this is turning out, the way it is, because I really don't want it to be really super dark. So while that dries, I'm going to mix up. I think I would like maybe to stay with a green and maybe add a little bit more yellow to it, because I kind of want this to look like it's sitting in the grass. Now, since I don't have any yellow here, I'm going to rinse my brush, get some pure yellow. This time I'm going to get a little more. And I'm going to add this to this part of the green. Let's see how that looks. I think, I don't know, I'm kind of feeling like maybe I want to make it a little warmer with this orange. And this is just totally up to you. You can really choose whatever colors you want. And maybe I'll try just a tad bit of that purple. See how it's turning it much darker. And I think that that's what I kind of want. Okay, I'm going to use this. I'm going to water this way, way down. Much, much water. And when I do this foundational kind of thing, I don't fill in every single area. I'm just trying to create like a little foundation for my basket to be sitting on. And I want it to kind of look like it's in, maybe even like at the beach, you know, because these all have a summer theme and some of them have a beach theme. So to have it sitting on something that maybe is not like lush green grass, but I don't want it to be floating in the air. So the way I do this, such water down, and then I take pure water and I just keep carrying it down until it's almost invisible. Okay, I like the way that looks. And I do feel like I want my basket to be a little bit, I'm going to try mixing up a little bit more darker. Yeah, I think this is going to do it. Yep. And I wanted to add this like to the insides and to the sides of the basket. So just have fun, experiment with different colors, mixing the browns. I think it's really fun. And once I add the black marker, the black ink pen, it's going to look different. So while I'm thinking of it, I just want to mention that if you've subscribed to my channel, I greatly appreciate you and thank you so much. And if you haven't, please consider doing that, subscribing. All you have to do is click the subscribe button and you should be notified when I post new tutorials, which I do about once a week. Sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, but on the average of once a week. And I'm a pretty new channel, so I don't have a ton of followers yet, but I'm working on it. And you could look for the links under the description. If you don't see it, you might have to click on more, and then the more will open up the entire description, and there'll be all kinds of information, including the PDF, so you can print it out and trace it, the line drawing if you want to. And there will be a link to my free class, my free workshop that I do. There will be a link to sign up for the Creative Heart Journal, which is my weekly publication. And yeah, just a lot of stuff in there. All right, so I am like super happy with the way this turned out. This is like not a very simple project, but I really like the way it looks. At this point, if you like your painting and you're happy with it, you could just leave it totally as is and be fine. But I always like to go back with a fine tip pen and outline my work. It's called watercolor sketching. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush. I did not use the smaller brush. I didn't really feel like I needed it. Again, this is the Princeton Velvet Touch #2 round brush, and I did the entire painting using that. Take a step back, see if there's anything you might have missed, anything you want to add more to, and I think I'm pretty good with the way this looks. And the next thing I'm going to do is do some outlining. So it's always good to make sure that your work is all extremely dry. You don't want to start this process if your painting is wet at all anywhere. It's best to just wait until it's dry and, just kind of test it with your finger, make sure. I'm going to start with a 0.5 Micron pen. And this is one painting that I feel like I actually wouldn't maybe necessarily really want to do the outlining. But the reason why I'm doing it is because I have this collection and I have done it to the other 6. So I want to stick with that look. So I'm kind of just working from left to right, and it's good to make kind of just a light sketching motion. Not pressing, just barely letting your pen touch the surface. Not pressing down at all. And at this point, if you've done this process before and you're pretty familiar with it, you don't necessarily have to watch me do the entire outlining. But if you want to watch it, you can, of course. Sometimes I outline just certain areas. Sometimes I outline everything. Just kind of depends on how I feel about it at the time. You don't have to have this perfect. It usually looks pretty cute if you go kind of outside the lines a little bit. Makes it look a little bit more wonky and fun. And once you get this done, it's like it just pops, which is partly why I really love this method. And it took me a while to even find an artist who actually uses this technique in her watercolor. And when you're first starting out, it's not so easy to get like the perfect shadows or the blending the way you want it or the perfect precision. That all takes practice. But my goal is to just help people create something that makes them happy, that's fun, that they can finish in one sitting, and that makes them feel like they've accomplished something, they've learned something, they've created something. So it's not about being perfect, it's about the process. It's about having fun, it's about relaxing, it's about creating something that you thought, wow, like I didn't even know I could do that. And I love seeing what people create. So I also have a Facebook group, and if you want to join that, you're more than welcome. I love it. If people get in there and start posting more of their artwork, I would absolutely love it. You know, maybe it's something that you're working on that you want some feedback, or maybe you just want to share something else you've created. That would be super. If you've done any of my tutorials, I would absolutely love to see them. So consider that. If you're on Facebook, it's a Facebook group called Create with Mrs. Midlife. It's mainly women midlife and older. And I think by doing this process, it really makes it look a little more whimsical. And like here, I can add detail to the pepper. Now, if you don't want to use a pen like this, you can always do this with a very fine tip brush and some dark paint, maybe a dark brown. And for that, you do have to have quite a steady hand, but it's always an option. So you want the lines to be a little bit uneven, a little bit like fatter here, thicker there. There's a lot to go around in this painting. A lot of detail work. So another thing, I would love if you drop me a comment section if you tried this, or if you haven't even, what you think of it. Maybe you have some ideas for some other things you'd like to see me paint. I would love to hear from you. Now, if you're watching this and you haven't started your painting yet, all these lines on the basket, I decided that I would trace them in just for a matter of them being straight. I just find it easier to paint things that when there's already a foundation there. All right, it's coming along. So again, after I've done most of this work, I kind of take a step back. Is there anything that I need to add? Is there anywhere I missed? Sometimes some sections look darker than others, and maybe I want to darken a different section up. But I think I like the way this has turned out. And I don't see anything at this point that I missed. I'm taking a look. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the white pen and I'm going to shake it up really good because I'm going to test it on this. And it's perfect. And I think I like this pen even better than the Sharpie. I'm going to put just a little white on the sun here to make it look a little brighter. And let me see if there's anything, maybe just a hint on the tomato. Just kind of make it look like there's a little bit of light here. Same thing with the carrot. And the pepper. So this is kind of just to bring interest, just to make it a little more interesting, a little bit brighter. You don't necessarily have to do the white pen. I did miss one thing here. I wanted to add a little detail to that flower because I did this one. Okay, I think this is done. I am really super happy with the way this turned out. It was fun. It is ready to frame. The last thing that I want to do here is sign my work, which I always recommend you sign your work. And I'm going to put it here in the right corner, and I just very lightly put my initials. And that's what I call a mark. So don't ever feel like you're going to ruin your work by signing it, because believe me, once you start painting, if you start giving people things as gifts, and they will start to almost not believe that you actually painted this. And so you want to sign it and show, yes, I did paint this. And there is one last thing that I feel like I'm going to do here, and I think I kind of missed this. Again, you know, when you take a step back, you're going to see things that you didn't notice. And what I kind of want to do is I want to make it a little bit darker underneath the basket here, because, again, there would be probably a little shadow. There would be a little shadow underneath the basket if it was sitting on the ground. And I could carry this over even to under some of these plants. Again, just to give it a little more interest. So keep practicing. You know, if this one didn't turn out exactly the way you want, see the good in it, because there's always good. It's always good to practice. If things don't come out exactly as you had planned, you can always try again. You know, it's all in the practice. And, you know, I'm evolving, changing as an artist. And I think a little bit here. All right. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed this. This is super fun, and I will see you in the next tutorial, which should be next week. I'm going to be gone for a few weeks on vacation, so I'm getting a lot done ahead of time. And so I'm not going to miss a week if I can help it. So take care, everyone. Thank you again for your support, and I will see you in the next tutorial.